Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Anna Guest. I'm the founder of Rising Tide Volunteer Solutions, and I'm really thrilled to have you joining us for this important conversation on volunteer engagement. I'm joined by my awesome wife, Heather, who is behind the scenes helping with tech today. And while people are making their connections, I'll just share a few housekeeping notes. So we encourage you to be on video if you're able to give this virtual space a more engaging and in-person feel. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to have you put them in the chat at any time. And we do have a Q&A section towards the end of our time together today. And I'll also just ask that you stay on mute if you're not speaking to avoid background noise. So as you're getting settled, um, I'd love for you to share your organization title and how volunteers are involved at your organization, just as a little bit of a way for us to get to know each other today. And so we are here to talk about how senior leaders, EDs, CEOs, communications and development directors, and others can support cultures of connected, impactful volunteer engagement. So I want to say thank you to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules. I know how busy the schedules of senior leaders can be, but the fact that you've taken time out of your day to talk about volunteers is really wonderful. So thank you for that. And I want to talk a little bit about what I mean by cultures of connected, impactful volunteerism and why that matters. So to me, that means that volunteers feel connected to your organization's mission, that they're clear about how their time and energy supports your organization's big picture goals and community impact, and that they feel valued and appreciated by organizational leadership and others throughout the organization, not just their immediate supervisor. So it means that that as an organization, we take the time to define what volunteers mean to us and what we stand for in the way that we acknowledge the complex worth that they bring to our teams and how we include them as integral parts of our organizations. As leaders, we have a critical role to play in consistently demonstrating these beliefs through our messages and our actions. When we truly recognize the value of volunteers and what they bring to our organizations and teams, and we invest in the positive experiences of the volunteers, but also the staff that work with them, our teams, programs, and organizations can function more efficiently and effectively, and we can make more impact in our communities. So today, we're going to explore what that looks like in practice with three leaders from organizations in Maine and Massachusetts. Just want to get them up on the screen with me. So I'm really thrilled to welcome our speakers. Sarah London is the Executive Director at Freeport Community Services in Freeport, Maine. FCS's mission of enriching lives, connecting neighbors, and helping those in need in Freeport and Pownell aligns with Sarah's passion of engaging with her local community and ensuring that all individuals are seen and valued. Sarah is an accomplished, compassionate leader, both through her nonprofit work and in her community. She's a talented grant writer, has developed critical programming to meet emergent needs, and values collaboration with colleagues, volunteers, and vested community members to create solutions and guide the work that needs to be done. An animal lover and aunt, Sarah recently took up the art of stained glass and is looking forward to abundant creativity in the new year. Lindsay Haight is the executive director of Our Neighbors Table and brings more than 20 years of experience in nonprofit administration and leadership. At a very young age, she was inspired by the spirit of Mahatma Gandhi that this world provides enough for everyone, and that has shaped her life's work to create strong and just communities. She's deeply proud that in 2018, ONT declared Amesbury its first food secure city. She now leads the organization toward its vision of establishing universal food access across all 12 towns of Massachusetts' northeastern Essex County by 2029. When not working, Lindsay serves on the boards of the Amesbury Housing Authority and the Amesbury Youth Fund, coaches youth sports, and enjoys the outdoors traveling with her two sons. And I'm honored to call this amazing woman my sister-in-law. Melissa Donegan is the director of the Healthy Living Center of Excellence at AgeSpan. Melissa assists in the overall management and dissemination of healthy living evidence-based programs in clinical and community settings across the state of Massachusetts. Melissa is the national director of the Healthy Ideas program, an evidence-based program that works one-on-one with older adults to identify and reduce the symptoms of depression. Melissa is a national reframing aging facilitator and a subject matter expert on ageism. She leads initiatives to promote overall wellness in aging, which include the health equity, social isolation and loneliness, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anti-ageism efforts. So welcome to all of you. I'm really thrilled to have you all here. We have a lot to talk about over the next hour or so. So let's just jump right in. I'd like to start by asking more about why connecting with volunteers is important to you as an organizational leader and how you build those connections. So Sarah, I will turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Anna, for this opportunity. And it's really lovely to see familiar faces here today. So love that. I think it's really important. We are an organization that's been in existence for 50 years, started by volunteers 50 years ago, which is really incredible. And it's amazing that we can still have involvement from those original volunteers in what we're doing today. And we are a smaller staff, and to do our critical programming, we need volunteers to be engaged. We need volunteers to understand the purpose of the mission, and why we're all collectively here under one roof. And it's really incredible to see how dedicated volunteers become when they do feel really included and really have the understanding of the mission and see the similar passion amongst staff and board members as well. I think any opportunity really to engage and show appreciation and pull folks into various committees and other aspects of the structure of the organization. It's certainly been effective for us here at the organization. And it's also been, I consider it a privilege to be able to get to know so many different people that care deeply about the same place, and having those relationships has been impactful to me, and I think to others in the organization as well.
Thank you for that. I love the word, privilege to get to know people who care about the same issues. Lindsay, let's hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Great to be here and see so many people really taking the time to devote to thinking about how you steward and cultivate your volunteers. It's funny, here at our neighbors table, I flipped the question here, and I know there's some other food organizations on the call today. Like many other food organizations, we were founded by community members who were volunteering their time, giving of themselves to creating food access to their neighbors. And so this organization was in existence for 18 years before those community members decided to invest in staff to help them essentially create systems so that the volunteers who were here on Monday could communicate and continue their work with the volunteers who show up on Friday, and everywhere in between. And so we really are a community-driven mission. And in fact, that community priority for universal food access is what allows us to create food secure communities that are pandemic tested and proven. And so it is a challenge, and I know we'll kind of touch on this a little bit later, but it's a challenge to bring people into an organization that is not internally led. It is the mission is community driven, and therefore my job as the executive director, as the job is for every one of our staff, is to facilitate and provide the systems and tools that allow for the continuity, for consistent, reliable programming from day to day. When, you know, a volunteer comes in and maybe takes a break from our mission or engages in a different way, that we provide that consistency that keeps the mission going on behalf of our volunteers. So the existence of our mission and the success of our mission really is driven by the members of the community who are giving their time and their talents and their treasure to our work. So I am here to serve them.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Lindsay. And I really like what you said about facilitating the systems and the tools that support volunteers in doing the best work that they can. I think that is so much of our role as staff people. So thanks for speaking to that. And Melissa.
Yes, thank you, Anna, for having me today. Good afternoon, everyone. So similar to Sarah, we are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year as well. We have grown tremendously. We are based in Lawrence, Massachusetts. So not only has age span, we were formerly Elder Services of the Merrimack Valley. We then merged with North Shore Elder Services, taking on 5 more communities. So we have grown exponentially. I've been with the organization. Sorry, I hope there's a lot of animal lovers because one of my dogs has decided it's lunchtime right to my right here, if you can hear the munching. So we have not only grown, you know, obviously older adults are living longer, healthier lives. So our consumer base has grown, but so has our, you know, employee base. So I've worked for the organization 20 years. I was number 120 something when I started. We have over 500 employees now, over 300 volunteers. So something that's important to me and why I want to foster, you know, close relationships with the volunteers is I don't want them to just feel like another number. I don't want them to think they're just shuffling paper and that they don't matter to us. So, you know, we have many different managers, different directors who touch, you know, we have Meals on Wheels drivers. We have so many different volunteers that are touching consumers, that are doing different roles within our organizations. And it's important for us to know who they are, what's important to them. And when I'm working with volunteers, I like to sit down and not interview them to know, okay, what are your skills and what are you going to bring to me? But who are you? What did you do in your past life? You know, are you retired? What was that career? Was it meaningful for you? What did you do? And do you want to do any of that still? Do you want to bring those past skills to us? You know, we do evidence-based healthy living workshops, but I had a past volunteer who was a graphic designer and still loved that and was able to bring some of those pieces to her volunteer job. So really getting, you know, that personal touch with them and seeing, can they bring some of those pieces? How does that fit into, you know, our mission? And just really making sure, yes, are there administrative duties we all need to do, volunteer or work-wise? Yes. But really just making sure it's meaningful for them, that they feel seen. And we are a humongous organization. And whether you're a volunteer or an employee, you can feel lost sometimes in that kind of environment. And, you know, for myself and the other directors, we just want to feel that they're not lost. And so, you know, that's why fostering those relationships, you know, like Lindsay said, it's not what they're doing for us, it's what we can do for them and make them feel welcome.
Yeah, that's really nice, Melissa. I appreciate that, you know, speaking towards the holistic approach to looking at volunteers, not just as, you know, how does that fit into the role we might be asking them to do, but, what are they bringing to the table as a person, and how does this, what is the meaning in it for them? What's the motivation? So thank you. Excellent. So I want to talk now a little bit about, as a leader of your organization, you have the opportunity to make decisions about how to invest resources for success. So when it comes to supporting a positive culture of volunteerism within your organization, what type of infrastructure do you invest in that sets your volunteers and your volunteer management staff up for success? And so this could include all kinds of things, from staffing to volunteer management software, training for volunteers, training for staff, policies. So I'd love to hear about that from each of you. And Sarah, we'll start with you again.
Thanks. As Anna knows very well, we have an incredibly talented volunteer coordinator. We traded back and forth for a couple of positions, but and Susan ended up back here, which I'm really, really pleased about. Susan Adams is our volunteer coordinator, and she certainly sets the bar high, both in her ability to just connect with volunteers and really create an individual experience for every single person who walks through the doors, but also has a very high level of integrity that and expectations for our volunteers. We have kind of gone through a bit of a transformation, thanks really to COVID and that moment to pause that our organization had, and looked at kind of moving from the grassroots mindset to a more professional mindset, and having job descriptions and having clear activities for our volunteers versus being open for anybody to walk through the door and we could just plug them into a certain role where there really wasn't that connection, and that, I think there's not really connecting with the individual interest. And so that's been a real growth and development process that we've had over the past few years, and incredibly grateful for the talents that Susan brings here. I also think that there is a very, for our organization, we do value saying thank you and also budgeting for it, because that does cost money. As a nonprofit, we can get a lot of donations and we can ask our partners to help us celebrate our volunteers. But it's also really important that we budget into our annual, process money to acknowledge. And then also, we have purchased a volunteer software database, Volgistics. And so that was a new thing, again, kind of post-COVID in our professional development that we've had within the organization, to really prioritize how we're doing things and prioritize efficiencies gained. Before, we were working with a lot of Excel spreadsheets and handwritten notes, and a lot was lost in translation. It worked for a long time, but as we were really looking at our trajectory and where we wanted to go, we knew we needed to make these few changes. And it's worked out really, really well for the organization. We have over 200 volunteers. We have some really great opportunities where we celebrate folks. We do breakfasts, we do holiday dinners, we do various activities throughout the year, and just little tokens of appreciation that really, I think, make it rewarding for our volunteers. It always feels very difficult to truly express what they mean to us, and we're able to find little ways to do so.
Excellent. Really great examples. I think it speaks to the importance of the skill sets that our staff bring, or that we nurture in the staff who work directly with our volunteers, and also, taking those steps as an organization to up your game in terms of technology that might support those staff in really being more efficient and giving your volunteers a better experience as well. So thank you so much for that, Sarah. And Lindsay.
Yeah, so as I kind of alluded to, our job as staff is to provide the infrastructure for volunteers to be able to carry out our mission. So I would say our infrastructure is, three-pronged. The first is making sure that the operational pieces are in place, and that goes, it's everything from, we use signup.com as an online scheduling tool, so our volunteers actually can manage their own schedules, and we want to facilitate that, whether you can commit to working 1 or 5 shifts a week, or you just come at an ad hoc basis when you're available, that they can get in there and schedule themselves. And so within that, having job descriptions, having some clear communications and expectations for when people come in. Every volunteer is required to go through orientation. I facilitate that with our community engagement coordinator, giving them an overview of the organization. This is sort of precedes the on-the-job training they get for their respective roles, and also gives them a glimpse of everything. We have a centralized volunteer hub on our website. Only oriented volunteers are given passwords to go in there, and they can see training videos, they can see our confidentiality agreement, our mission statement, other news and things that we blog post, staff directories, all of those things are on that hub. And the other important piece that even before we started growing our staff was putting systems in place. You can come in and from one group of volunteers, one shift to the next, you feel like you're constantly putting out fires. And so just putting basic systems in place, like, a centralized binder that sits on the counter in the kitchen, that lists what's on the menu and who's working today and who's working tomorrow, and who's doing what job. So when they report, they know who's going to be there. If there are, our sponsor volunteers who are coming in, who are they and who's going to be there to greet them. A list. So if we're running out of inventory, there's a place where people can put it. And so they know. So we always use, we've really come, particularly in COVID, have come to use two pillars in all of our operations, predictability and reliability. And I think in, my 14 years of tenure here at our neighbors table, and more years than that in the field, predictability and reliability is what makes people management effective. And so it's the same with the volunteers, and giving them those operational systems so that they feel confident that when they leave, that the job is going to continue. And when they return, they can pick right up from where somebody else left off. Then when we started bringing on more and more staff, I think what became apparent to us pretty quickly was we needed to hire people who understood people management. We weren't hiring people to get in and do the jobs, the day-to-day programmatic or office jobs, or, we were hiring people to facilitate and help manage the process. And so making sure that we tailored our job descriptions and our hiring practices to that perspective, and still providing them ongoing training, because I think particularly most people are working in an organization where it's staffed first and volunteer supplement. And for us, we're the flip side. And so it's a constant training. We actually put all of our staff through the Service Enterprise Initiative, and we're certified. And so as part of that process, making sure we had all our policies and procedures in place, job descriptions and other kinds of best practices. Also making sure that we were really tapping into those more professionalized skills that volunteers bring. So not just stocking shelves and chopping onions, but also, as some of my fellow panelists already mentioned, graphic design, legal expertise. We have a intellectual property attorney, pro bono, right? That's one of those professional skills. And then supporting volunteers. So people management is part of our staff's weekly supervision sessions with their supervisors. Like, how is the team working and how are you communicating with them? We develop pre-shift talking points every week, because we realized some volunteers might work in the kitchen over at that program at that other site, and other volunteers are, on just a committee, or they're working in the office, but they all want to know what's going on across the organization. And so having talking points, having pre-shifts, that everybody is required to host a pre-shift. And I came out of the restaurant, many years in the restaurant industry, had a pre-shift for all the wait staff and the kitchen staff, so you knew it was on the menu today. we do the same thing. And so whether you're in the warehouse or you're in the market or you're in the office, when volunteers come in to start that shift, we begin with a, hey, how are you? Here's new people. This is what we're doing today. This is your impact last time you were here. And here's some other cool things you need to know, what's going on in the organization, and holding staff accountable to making sure that they're involving their volunteers, just like they were paid employees, that they're being involved in decision-making. And never did that become more important than during COVID. Predictability and reliability in March of 2020. I mean, who could create that? We actually created quarterly checkpoints. At first it was weekly, and then it was bi-weekly, and then it was monthly, and then we got to quarterly. And even if the outside world changed, we would set a course of what our safety protocols were, what our quarantining protocols were, what all of our operational changes were. We would set them for a period of time. And before we changed them, we would survey. We were surveying people to death. Sorry, bad pun, but just constantly involving people about, if we no longer require masks, how is that going to make you feel? If we require vaccines, are you going to still come? How, what's the backlash going to be for that? So every time we rolled out a change, it was consensus among 300 people. And I think we lost one volunteer. Eventually she came back 6 months later, and now she's an employee. And so just being able to create that constant sense of predictability and reliability. And then the final piece of our infrastructure is around how we formalize and institutionalize stewardship. And so how are we constantly communicating with people? We send out every Monday, we send out a weekly e-blast just to all of our volunteers, in addition to them getting all of our other communications electronically or print. Volunteer Appreciation Week, we send every single one of our volunteers a birthday card. They all get Christmas cards as well, holiday cards. We have a big barbecue every year. We recognize our community champions in our annual breakfast. So just different opportunities. And we do that because we have a database that tracks not only their personal information, but also every time they work. And so we can keep track, like if somebody's working 52 shifts a year, right? That's like a part-time job. And so being able to recognize people accordingly, recognize their anniversaries and whatnot. So that's about it.
Just a few things.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Not much at all. Yeah, and really, to come off of Lindsay's, a lot of that is around communication, and a lot of that is what we saw at AgeSpan. Once we merged with North Shore Elder Services, our main office being in Danvers and now having a satellite, our main office in Lawrence and having our satellite office in Danvers, and having so many different departments that touch volunteers, we only had a part-time volunteer coordinator, and we just saw, okay, wow, this is not working. When somebody sort of onboards to start a job, we see how many, different bells and whistles need to go off to onboard that person. So I think our sort of best decision we made in sort of infrastructure wise was taking somebody who already worked in our HR department, and we now have a volunteer and intern manager who sits in our HR department. And she already, knew the ins and outs of that. And she oversees all of those processes. And we utilize the applicant tracking system that we already were using for everyone that applies for employment within our organization. And now that is how we take all of our volunteer applications as well. So folks can go onto our website and apply for volunteer opportunities that way. We're doing virtual recruitment events as well. And so now we can sort of have all of that, digital data at our fingertips as well. So we can have analytics, reports, automated communication, and interview scheduling, and all of that. And so we're, sort of mirroring our employment onboarding with our onboarding of volunteers as well. So it's really making that streamlined, not only for us to just have better checks and balances. Okay, who needs, we have a lot of internal security measures as well. So something, as simple as, okay, who's going to need a lanyard and a badge? Who needs laptop? Who needs certain, different equipment and things like that. But it also allows us to have a much better orientation and onboarding process for them. So they're not showing up on the first day and just being bounced around. It really makes them feel part of the organization, so they are getting a really nice orientation to the organization. This is who we are. This is our mission. This is what's important to us. And so they really feel right away, you are, part of our organization. This is who we are. And then, they're introduced and taught their volunteer job. And so, I've, worked in social services for almost 25 years now. And I think we've all been part of either an internship or a job or a volunteer job where you're kind of like, oh my God, what am I doing? And we all work on a shoestring budget. And so we've all been there, but it is very easy to feel like, oh God, does anyone know I'm here? Did people forget that I'm in this conference room, or that should I leave? And so it really has made people feel like they belong, that we care about them, that, their time with us is very valuable. And so, that has certainly and has not only helped us keep everything in line, and offboarding as well, making sure that we're keeping those checks and balances all the way through. And like Lindsay said, we can sort of keep track of, okay, where are people, throughout the process, throughout the day, throughout the week. So it's just more consistency. So that has certainly helped internal and, just really formalizing everything. That's definitely helped with infrastructure. And it helped that we already had this employee application tracking system, and that we knew the ins and outs of it. And so it was, a fairly easy process to add volunteer processes into that. So.
Awesome. I mean, really impressive systems and approaches from all of your organizations. I really liked hearing about the consistent theme of communication and how important that is for volunteers. That really resonates with my own experience, that really keeping volunteers front of mind is a major stakeholder group that we need to be communicating important updates to and bringing them along with us every step of the way. Is critical. And I loved hearing about the importance of the orientation and onboarding process and really getting people off to a good start. And Lindsay, I love that you are an active participant in that. I just think it sets such a nice tone right off the bat. So so thanks for sharing. I'd like to talk candidly about challenges for a few minutes. We have certainly acknowledged that volunteers are critical team members and resources for our organizations, but engaging and working with them is not without challenges. So I'd be curious to hear what lessons you may have learned the hard way that have helped you shape your current practices. And Sarah, we'll start with you.
The most important lesson I learned pretty quickly was not to move the trash can without talking to the volunteers first about that. Still remember that experience quite clearly and learned a lot from that. And I think, one of the biggest things, so I've been with the organization for about 9 years now. And again, kind of as we were coming up to the whole COVID event, we were really feeling the stress and the strain of having a somewhat unorganized volunteer program opportunity. Having folks who have been involved for so long led to a lot of ownership of certain roles in certain areas in the organization. And there were a lot of challenges, and additional work was being made for staff, we have 17 staff members and 200 volunteers to make things happen. So when we were having a volunteer program that wasn't really functioning well, the everything was then kind of falling on staff. It was a great opportunity for folks to come and socialize with one another. That's kind of what things had turned into, but it wasn't an effective use of time or fulfillment of our mission. We did a lot of internal culture work at that point to really identify what we wanted for expectations for everybody coming through our doors, not just volunteers, but staff as well, our board members, community members. And that really helped shape, along with it, again, professionalizing job roles. We have a volunteer, kind of like a volunteer/employee handbook. So we're all on the same page about expectations. And that has really helped kind of just offer that clarity that we were really lacking before. It wasn't an easy process. Change is very, very hard. And we did lose some volunteers, as we went through that. There was COVID. So, I mean, again, it kind of gave us that excuse to pause and make these changes and then slowly roll them out as we were able to welcome a couple of people back gradually over time. And it was tough to see those familiar faces no longer want to engage with the new structure that was in place to make our organization overall healthier and better for those we're serving, and the community who created us. So, I think, again, kind of reiterating what Melissa and Lindsay have said, just the communication piece around it is so critical. And when you don't get it right, being humble and being able to own mistakes and talk through that and learn from other people's feelings and their thoughts and expertise. I think you just need to remain open to feedback and welcome it and embrace some positive things that can come from that, even when situations are really challenging.
Thanks for that, Sarah. I really appreciate you speaking to the importance, but also the challenges of change management with volunteers. It takes courage as an organization to put your flag in the sand about something and say, this is really what we need to do going forward, knowing that you might lose some people along the way, but helping them through that as much as you can. Lindsay.
Yeah, perfect segue. That really is the crux of any of the any of the challenges that I feel like really still stay in my mind. It all comes down to change management. And so I would say if you or your staff don't have training in change management and you're managing volunteers, then it would be a worthwhile investment to get that kind of training. Everything from just bringing staff on to the organization. I was the first paid executive director, and I showed up after my predecessor as a volunteer served it for 9 years. And here's a new person to, current day, just coming out of COVID. We're about to open a new facility for the second time. And so it really is about change management. And again, I go back to that predictability and reliability. How much can you help people anticipate what their day is going to be like, and how well can they rely on you to follow through if you say you're going to provide them with a tool, or you're going to provide them with an opportunity, or you're going to express gratitude. And I think the story that jumps right into my head was in 22. So I had mentioned we had quarterly checkpoints in COVID to talk about, okay, how will operations change, for the next 3 months based on CDC, based on current risk, based on our guest needs. And so we had these quarterly checkpoints all along, starting in March of 2020 was our first town hall. And in 22, when everything started opening it up, it just so happened we ended up losing almost half of our employees. They moved out of state, their spouses had opportunities. It had been a very traumatic several years for us as a staff, including our volunteers. And so some of our employees, just moved on to their next opportunities all at the same time. And because we were in flux and it caught us off guard, we skipped one checkpoint. So we were supposed to have a checkpoint in June of 22, and our staff were all leaving in May. And so our leadership team was overwhelmed with doing some of the day-to-day work, and we skipped that June checkpoint. And by the middle of July, it was like pure mutiny. There was so much angst, you could feel it. No matter what site you walked into, no matter what time of day or which day, you could feel the angst, and it was projecting in hostility, and you could just cut through that tension with a knife. And so for me as the executive director, I take a step back and I'm working through, assuming some of my directors were going to sort of push forward and engage, but they themselves were going through that traumatic experience of one, they've been living through the previous 2 years, and now they've just lost a bunch of their employees. And so for me, it was like a bottom up, top down, all across, recognize that we needed to just name the trauma, and we needed to acknowledge that I messed up by allowing us to skip a checkpoint when that checkpoint was the most important. And so, we called a town hall. It was still virtual, but we called a town hall, and I just had to own it, that we underestimated how much they were relying on us to provide that sense of predictability and reliability when the world was still chaotic. And so leading people through change is really critical. And so following that, in the spring of 23, we reopened all of our programming, and we took a 6-month, very, very managed change process. Whereas like every 2 weeks, we were reporting out and cycling through information with all of our, I'm going to call them employees, paid or not, that were, managing how we were going to flip our programs back, but in a different way, to move forward. And now we've just we've just launched the same process as we're preparing to move our facilities in the next 6 months. And so I think just not underestimating the importance of that communication piece that we've touched on. And as Sarah also said, sometimes you have to recognize, like, as leaders, people are looking to us to provide that. And if we don't, stopping and resetting before it's too late, and just owning that. And it really, for us, was also a huge part of our healing process coming out of COVID and preparing to sort of enter into a reopened world.
Thanks so much, Lindsay and Melissa.
Yeah, it's not funny, but I was sort of jotted down notes for myself before this, and next to this question, I wrote, keep in touch, even if you don't have big updates. So, my sort of lesson was similar, when COVID hit, especially with the healthy living programs, our programs were always held out in the community, these workshops. And when that happened, everything stopped, and we were all sort of waiting to see, okay, what is our next, what is the news? Can we do these virtually? Can we do them over the phone? What is happening? So, sometimes it was daily updates, weekly updates. We were constantly meeting with people. And as we got our footing, it went from weekly meetings to bi-weekly to then monthly. And we needed to quickly learn that just because we knew there were no new updates, didn't mean that people didn't want to hear from us, right? And so we were busy sort of getting reacclimated, and our other things on our desks that had collected dust that now needed our attention, didn't mean that those meetings that everybody sort of, dropped everything for and were attending, that we kind of backed off and said, okay, there's no need for now these drop everything meetings, and we can kind of get back to regular programming. people were like, okay, but wait a minute, what's going on here? So yeah, we kind of had to swallow that and say, wow, okay, we probably should have asked. Okay, the information is not needing to be pumped out as much as it did, but do you still need that level of support? Do you still need just these bi-weekly or monthly check-ins? Do you all still just want this space to come and shoot ideas off one another? Do you just want this space to decompress? And we didn't do that. And so yeah, not just assuming that because you don't have stuff to press out that people don't sort of want that space that has been created. So keeping in touch and sort of having that two-way street to say, okay, we're thinking this, how does that feel for everyone? I'm not just assuming that, they're gonna, just necessarily want that time back. We all think, yeah, everyone's gonna want this hour back in their week. Respectfully ask if that support was helpful for them. So sort of along those same lines. Yeah, because we did lose a lot of our sort of volunteer leader workforce with the pandemic, because not everybody, felt comfortable leading these workshops in a Zoom environment. A lot went into that. It was very tricky for people to navigate. And so, yeah, that was definitely a lesson learned.
Yeah, really great feedback here. I love what you're all saying, and really similar lessons learned, which is really interesting. I'm just keeping my eye on the time, and I think we're gonna move into some questions. I have one in the chat for us, and that is, could you talk a little bit about your screening requirements for volunteers, applications, interviews, background checks? Anyone want to weigh in on that?
Sure. We do have I wouldn't say a rigorous screening process, but we do have a process that we have folks go through. Like I shared, kind of before we made our transition to how we do things now, anyone could just walk off the streets and come in and be plopped into a volunteer opportunity. And it worked for a while until it didn't. So we do have a volunteer application that we have folks fill out. It is accessible online, and people can also do it in person. We do, ask folks if they've had any sort of criminal history and what that is. But for the most part, we have staff involved and engaged during any volunteer job, except for our drivers, which we do a formal background check on, because they will be one-on-one alone with an individual. So we want to make sure that that's a safe situation. So, we have worked successfully with individuals who have a variety of, experiences in their past, and it's been quite successful in doing that. And, Susan, our volunteer coordinator, is really, really dedicated to finding the right fit and being supportive to each individual. And I think it just, again, really shows with how well things are going. We do have a process as well to ask a volunteer to leave. So sometimes we do need to terminate that relationship. And I think having a solid understanding of what that looks like and an expectation or a process leading up to that as well, to give folks a chance to change behaviors and kind of understand what the needs are, that has been really very helpful.
Yeah, we do require background check, a Corey background check. Some of our positions would require transportation, some don't. And so, it would depend. And so if somebody were to go on our website and fill out the volunteer application, at that point, our program manager could call them and let them know, the different opportunities and sort of, match them up with what's available based on some of their skills, and if transportation is an issue and things like that. But yeah, we do require a background check.
That's great. Yeah, one of the things that's really interesting for organizations to consider is kind of a risk assessment around the type of work that volunteers are doing, who they're working with, and that really informs how deep you need to go. And some organizations are required based on their funding or the type of population that they serve.
And I
Um,
would just add on that too. It just occurred to me, most of us are protected under the Good Samaritan law. So if something should happen, a volunteer does something and it causes, harm to themselves or to someone else, most of the time you're covered under the Good Samaritan law. But it's important that the organization has policy and procedures in place so that the organization is not viewed as negligent for setting up a situation in which a volunteer may cause harm to someone else.
See, we've got another question that's come in. How much do you communicate with volunteers about budget and funding available for your organization, especially when there is a budget cut or reduced funding?
We kind of have a unique situation at our organization. Fortunately, have not experienced a budget cut while I've been here, so I can't really speak to that scenario. But one of our components of our organization, or one of our revenue streams, is a thrift shop, and that brings in almost half of our annual budget, which is really incredible. So volunteers who work in the thrift shop are aware of what they've helped earn throughout the day. This year we celebrated earning over $500,000 in our thrift shop, which I still can't quite believe, even though it's the best one around. So if you're in Freeport, come to it. But so it does kind of create a bit of an incentive sometimes between different volunteer groups. They want to see who can sell more, and it can create a fun little buzz. And another component of the shop that we do is we have a roundup opportunity every month for our customers. So again, volunteers are interested and engaged in how much they helped raise for either our organization or one of our partnering organizations that we like to support throughout the year. But not really like nitty-gritty budget stuff.
Yeah.
That's generally not a part of the conversation unless they're on a committee.
I think that's such a great question, and it makes me wonder why I don't. We approve our annual budget. We're primarily private funding, so at this organization we don't experience crazy government-related cuts. But we do encourage advocacy when we know that there are cuts to other programs that affect our guests. And so we do talk to our volunteers about advocating and contacting their delegation about those kinds of cuts. But we don't make an announcement every year when we adopt our annual budget and talk about, we do talk with them, and they're part of the planning of if we're adding staffing and if we're reorganizing a program, but not to that level. So great question. And now I'm gonna think about how I can incorporate that.
I would just add, I've had a little bit of experience with this actually. During COVID, the organization that I worked for did have to face staffing cuts, and I would come back to the conversation we had about change management. I mean, this is really about from the high level, getting really clear about the message, what the message is, as transparent as you can be without without oversharing, and making sure that people who manage volunteers know what to say, know how to respond to questions when they come up, and really have a clear, be thinking about how are volunteers going to be impacted, and what does this mean for their roles, and maybe having a special time to meet with them and answer questions. I mean, they are critical parts of the team, so you just want to be thinking through, if I were a volunteer, what would I want to know? What are the rumors that are going to be flying potentially? So we are coming down to the end of our time together. I want to thank Lindsay and Sarah and Melissa for such thoughtful and actionable discussion. You gave so many wonderful and concrete ideas about how you're engaging with your volunteers and investing in the type of infrastructure that really sets your whole organization up for success. So I know I'm leaving today feeling inspired. And I hope others of you are also feeling that way. As we wrap up, I would love to just share a few resources from Rising Tide Volunteer Solutions that can support you in creating connected, impactful culture around volunteerism at your organization. So I'm really excited to be focusing on 3 trends in volunteer engagement in the coming year. Understanding and leveraging AI tools that can support efficiency and volunteer management. And that's pushing my own comfort level a little bit. So I hope people will learn along with me. Sharing tools and strategies to soothe and prevent burnout among staff and volunteers, and looking at how we can build strong partnerships that leverage corporate volunteerism programs. So I'll be offering free monthly webinars on these and other topics, as well as regular content on social media. Our first session coming up is on Burnout Balm, and that is February 15th. So I hope you share this type of programming with your staff that are working directly with volunteers. Another thing, we talked quite a bit today about staff support and training and making sure that the staff that are working with volunteers really have the skill set to do that well. And I have a variety of skill building workshops that address core skills and strategies around volunteer engagement. I do have an upcoming public series starting in March that includes success from the start, connection is currency, and skills for difficult conversations. But these workshops can also be brought, privately to your team as well. Volunteer recruitment is a common and perennial challenge for many organizations, and I love working on recruitment strategy with people, so would love to talk if you'd like to think about energizing your recruitment approach. And then I'm really excited to be launching a new service, Engage 360. It's a holistic volunteer program review. It's a detailed exploration of your organization's volunteer culture and practices that optimize sustainable and impactful mission-aligned engagement. So this is a really valuable tool for organizations that are relying on volunteers to carry out their mission and are having challenges with things like recruitment, retention, maybe losing volunteers somewhere during your onboarding process, engaging or re-engaging volunteers post-pandemic, inefficiency and administrative aspects of volunteer management, again, staff or volunteer burnout, managing difficult dynamics or volunteer staff dynamics, or maybe you have a sense that you're underutilizing the skills of the volunteers you have. So many opportunities there. You can find full details at risingtidevolunteersolutions.com. And there are a couple links you'll find in the chat. And then just a couple of final wrap-up notes. I will be sharing the recording and any materials from today. I'd love it if you'd follow me on LinkedIn and Facebook to keep up to date on volunteer trends and resources. And then there's a very brief survey on your way out, and your input is so helpful to me in just making sure that I'm bringing you really valuable content to support the work that you're doing with engaging volunteers. So I want to say a final heartfelt thank you to Lindsay, Sarah, and Melissa for making this such an inspiring and engaging discussion. Thank you, all of you, for your insights and experience. And thanks everyone for being here today. And we'll see you soon. Thank you.